Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. It's my honor to be at the LItFest. And to those of you that are home, hello. Thank you for zooming in. This is my second time speaking at a LItFest, which is fun for me. And today I'm going to be speaking to you about my journey. The journey that led me not only to self-publish my own books, but create Whistleslick Press. I'm PJ HarteNaus, an author and educator, and I write books for children and for adults. Over 10 years ago, through necessity and desperation, I made the decision to self-publish. And to this day, I can honestly say it was the smartest, wisest decision I've ever made. But I'm here in front of you today to tell you about my experiences, admitting my failures, and to celebrate my small successes. I decided some time ago that I wanted to share my stories with you because I truly wanted to help others avoid the expensive pitfalls and traps I experienced in the publishing world. Not knowing what to do next could certainly lead you to the feeling of wanting to give up writing together altogether. And you know what? That never should be. When I wanted to publish my first book, it was at a time when self-publishing was considered the poor cousin to traditional mainstream publishing. It was considered a last resort for those who were considered not really authors. And the truth is that self-publishing had always had that stigma until recently. But self-publishing has come a long, long way. I, like many authors, thought that finding a traditional mainstream publisher was the only option of getting my book published. But I was wrong. My search for that traditional publisher who'd take me under their wings and guide me towards a successful career as a writer for children was not to be. Rather, it was one of extreme frustration with doors closing over and over again, rejections, and even silence on the other end. Then eventually I fell into the hands of vanity printers, which for me was not only a very costly experience, but one that made me feel as if I couldn't afford to ever publish another book again. I was lost at sea in the publishing world. I had no faith in who I was and what I so desperately wanted to do. Believe me when I say, I wish I had someone showing me the different possible options, the step-by-step process, but I had to learn the hard way. I think it's important that I share with you first the trigger points in life that first set me on the path of what I was meant to do. For all of us, we have trigger points that happen through our lives. It's important that we try to listen and recognize these trigger points, maybe even embrace them, but certainly never ignore them. As I tell you my story, think about the trigger points in your life that brought you to sit here today at the LItFest with me to learn about self-publishing, and more importantly, of who you are as a writer. As a child, I always read the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. Her life stories just made me want to live back in the 1800s in that log cabin, going to school in a one-room schoolhouse. And it was just such a simpler life then. I loved it. I didn't realize that those stories would help shape my writing as an author of future books for children. And when my friends went off to college, I stayed behind at 18, 19, working 9 to 5. I found that I had a passion for reading and studying Native American history. I was empathetic to their plight, so much so that I really felt I had to visit the reservations and the battlefields. So with my dog at my side, I drove to South Dakota, to the Badlands, the Black Hills, and then on to Wounded Knee. And then I went further on into Wyoming to the Little Bighorn battlefield. I soaked up as much of that history as I could. Then I had the opportunity to take a trip across the ocean to Paris, France, Before I boarded my midnight flight, I visited a little shop at the airport, O'Hare, as a matter of fact, and I purchased, just by coincidence, a paperback about the biography of Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France. And it was also about the French Revolution. I read it on my night flight as I turned 21 years old in the air. Little did I know that when I'd arrive in Paris, I would tour the Conciergerie hours later. That's the same prison I had just read about, where the Queen was kept after her arrest. The tour then led us to Marie Antoinette's small jail cell. The cot and the small window looking out into the enclosed garden was still there, all of it. This is where the Queen awaited her execution at the guillotine. I took pictures with my little Instamatic camera. I was mesmerized. It was then that I noticed the tour had continued without me. I tried to open the cold black jail cell handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked. So I tried it over and over again, knowing that the tour was down a ways, trying to get out. But I just said, oh, well. I turned around and I took more pictures. I was so mesmerized, like I said. Eventually, the angry tour guide came back to find the lost American who couldn't follow directions. That was trigger point number one for me. It's the history and the childhood books and the stories and the historical travels that led me down the path of wanting to teach the history that I loved to a younger generation. Soon after I returned home, I enrolled in college. 4 years later, I was teaching elementary children the importance of history and its lessons. I was in my element. I found my niche. I went back to school to obtain my master's in education, and it was the last master's class assignment that was a turning point in my life that led me to my writing career. My assignment became trigger event number 2. I was asked to create something educational for children outdoors. I knew that Galena would have been the perfect place to create something for extraordinary young minds. I was asked by the Green Space Director to help revive a boarded up one-room schoolhouse that was in the Galena territory, and it was built in 1859. When I accepted this challenge, I soon realized that this wasn't a challenge at all. I felt as if I was coming home to something that I always loved. It was just like that Laura Ingalls Wilder, just like those Laura Ingalls Wilder books that I used to read. It triggered memories of my childhood. I was excited. It was the year 2003 when I began my journey of discovery, from digging up artifacts inside that little one-room schoolhouse to going on the outside and digging up some of the land around it, researching for history. And then I met Bob. He was a gentleman farmer from Stockton, Illinois, whose passion was to retrieve old school journals from the garbage behind the courthouse, saving the history of those one-room schoolhouses throughout this area. One day, he handed me 2 old journals, one dated 1871 and the other one 1923. Both had belonged to Belden School. The pages told many stories of teachers who not only taught within its 4 stoned walls, but the students who learned their lessons back in the day, and the trustees who made decisions of all kinds. I was in my glory. Everything I loved about history came full circle for me. I was given the name of a few elderly students who were happy to speak to me about their experiences at Belden School. I interviewed them as they relived their stories with great joy. And then I decided I'm going to make this my mission. I'm going to save their stories from the 1930s and the 1940s. Trigger point number 3, writing their stories. What an experience it was to listen to them relive their life, They're memories of a time long ago that was so simple and endearing. Great stories, too, funny stories. We had a class reunion for the elderly students while we were restoring the old school. I penned every story they told me. But what was I going to do with these stories? That was the question. Deep down, I knew that their memories of Belden School needed to be preserved. So I guess one could say I was guilted into becoming a writer, a storyteller, one that led me to self-publishing. I loved every minute of what I was going to do next. So I gathered those incredible stories, wove a little fiction into the storyline, introducing just two little boys that were pals in the 1890s, but their friendship had problems with bullying in and around Belden School. Same story, same pranks, but a different time was my marketing phrase. I also marketed it as an anti-bullying story or series for children, told from different perspectives of victim and bully. The first book in the Belden Boy series was born, The Adventures of Peter McDougal. But I wondered what my next step would be. I truly felt that I needed to publish the first story, and eventually I did. But there were a lot of costly bumps in the road, or should I say many ditches. Looking back, I wish the process of publishing the first book had been quick and smooth. I really did, mainly so that the elderly students could have seen their story in print, but it wasn't to be. Trying to get this wholesome story published was most difficult. So began my journey of looking for a traditional mainstream publisher. So I went to Borders, remember that store, Borders bookstore? I purchased their big, thick catalog. It was a Bible of traditional publishers, big, thick catalog. And I dog-eared that catalog all year long and the next year. I researched publishers who might be interested in publishing my first book for children. Now, once I targeted a handful of those publishers, I followed the process and their strict guidelines, very strict. As probably many of you already know, I needed to write a query letter that was tailored specifically to the particular publishing company I was submitting to. Being careful not to have that query letter be too long or too short, or they'd toss it. I also needed to research finding previous books that that particular publishing company had already published that were like mine, and a few books that were not like mine, explaining in great detail with examples the similarities and the differences of each book. I got to say, I was lucky if I got 2 done a day. That's how much research it took. It was a lengthy process. If I was lucky, I would receive a response, which, unfortunately for my manuscript, was either, sorry, you're not a fit for our publishing company letter, or I'd receive nothing at all. And then there's the question about hiring an agent or not. It was a fact that having an agent could open many doors to certain publishers, but at a price, obviously. Nevertheless, I now started the process of writing a query letter to the agent. After agent, after agent, some responded, some did not. I was so discouraged during those months and months of sending query letters out to publishers and agents, not knowing which way to turn. I knew I needed help. I stumbled across an advertisement from someone in the field of publishing who was on the West Coast named Nick. His prior career as a literary agent allowed him to create a course for those who need that guidance on how to write a successful query letter. He guaranteed his clients that if they followed correctly his procedure, they would secure a publisher. I paid $300 for the course. I watched a video of how to write this important introductory letter to a publisher, thinking that maybe Just maybe my previous query letters were the reason why the doors were not opening. Then, as part of the package, he offered to speak with me on the phone for a quick consultation. He recorded it, he sent me the recording, and that was it. I was no closer to finding a publisher at all. Then one day, I was lucky. So I thought. I found a mainstream publisher, I think. Gabriel was on the other line. He praised me to high heaven for a wonderful storyline. Oh, and he thought this book should definitely be published. Hooray! I was on my way. He complimented my work, making me feel very validated as an author. Gabriel said his team would love to work on the illustrations, and I would be in the loop throughout the entire process. I was overjoyed and blind. He said he needed to send me a contract. Of course he would. Well, when I read the fine details and the cost for him to publish my book, I was hesitant. I was shocked, but I signed. After all, I thought this was what all writers must go through, right? I'm okay. I was still blind, but relieved that I was finally discovered. I hate to admit this still to this day. I'm even embarrassed about it. All this cost me $8,000 for one tiny little book. Well, when the process began, Gabriel was gone. No communication, no return phone calls, realizing that he was just a sales rep. And I ended up having, on this small little book, 7 different illustrators, different styles. I couldn't comment on any changes to the illustrations at all. There was no consistency with having so many artists, and there was no answers to my questions at all because the artists changed weekly. They were probably right out of school. By that time, I realized I had been taken by a vanity printer, and that's one of many that still exist today. I promised myself I would never, ever do this again. I felt foolish. And then I wrote a second book in the Belden Boy Series. I saw an article in the Chicago Tribune about this quaint little publishing company up in Minnesota. The picture of the publisher was a cute older man, grandpa type, who started this business with great intentions long ago. I loved what I read, so I went and visited the sleepy little printer in Minnesota, finding out that the older man had just passed on, but that the new owners would happily print my book. Well, let me tell you, they weren't that sleepy. Yet again, another $8,000. I'm asking myself, what's with this magic number of $8,000 for a book? And a contract that made no mention whatsoever that I needed to keep at least 8 books of mine in their warehouse. And I had to pay, and it was guaranteeing that my account was still actively open. I had to pay rent of $40 a month for that space. I fought it. I said, you never mentioned this. And where in the contract does this say this, blah, blah, blah. Dead in the water. You just had to pay it or it would pile up. I was dumbfounded and taken again. Why was this publishing thing so difficult? One thing was for sure, I realized that I couldn't afford to keep on writing. Yet my 4th and my 5th grade students, they loved what I wrote and they wanted more, and they were my cheering section. I was caught in the middle. I was naive. $16,000 for publishing 2 books. Obviously, I had no idea about this process. I was embarrassed, and truth is, I still am that I fell for this twice. Truly, my joy was in writing this anti-bullying series for children, so I started the 3rd book regardless. It would be a literacy lesson, I decided, for my students. I would pull my students in on the writing process, and they loved it. I even dedicated the book to them. They were so thrilled, but in the back of my mind, I wasn't sure how I was ever going to publish this again. At this rate, I couldn't keep up with the expense of publishing. I had no clue that there were different kinds of publishing avenues. All I knew was that I was rejected from the traditional publisher, the folks who would take care of everything. I questioned why the two publishers that I had just worked with wanted to publish my books at all. Well, then, a V8 moment. I pieced it together. It was because I paid them. Traditional publishers will never ask for a fee. They pay you. That is, if they accept your manuscript. How could I have been so blind? I was just lost. And then, two things happened that opened up my eyes. First, our elementary school had a very well-known author that was coming to our school district to speak to all the children about her newly released chapter book that she had written. Very famous book. We were all excited. My students came up to me and asked if I thought that she would sign the book that she had, that the book they had purchased from her already through Scholastic, if she would sign it for them. And I said, why not? Let's try. You sign your books for us, Mrs. HarteNaus. Maybe she will. Okay. Well, while she was wrapping up her speech, saying her goodbyes, my kiddos all stood up and they were ready to walk up and shake her hand professionally. I told me to have good manners. They were all set ready with their book in their hand. But before we knew it, she was whisked off the stage and gone. My students were devastated. And it hit me. The author was not in control of what she could do at her own events. I realized that she must have transferred her ownership rights to her book to that traditional publisher. It hit me then that I was the lucky one. I could sign my books to my students whenever and wherever I wanted. I could talk to them, I could hug them. I was the lucky one. Then later that week, on the weekend, I attended a book author event in Freeport at the library. There was a woman there who had her own publishing company, and I was impressed with, the quality of her books. I told her about my dilemma, and she said the words that would change my life forever. She said, Patty, create your own self-publishing company. I said, I can do that? I can do that? Those magic words led to the creation of Whistleslick Press. I published that book not for $8,000, but for $350. $350. I was in control. Friends, I want you to know that self-publishing is on the rise and far more respected than ever before. It's been said that self-publishing is a legitimate path for success for aspiring writers. But be educated. I want you to be educated about the pros and cons of all three: the self-publishing, the traditional publishing, and the publishing with a vanity printer. I want to explain to you what I never knew. I want you to be prepared and aware. So please take note. Because knowing the differences between the different publishing avenues available can make or financially break an author. Just ask me. So let's identify the three different options. Traditional publishing. First, I want you to know that there have been, and I feel there have been authors out there that have been successfully published this way, and kudos to them. But know that they will give up some control. It's definitely a fact. Your agent, if you have one, may want to revise or have you revise or rewrite your work before it goes to the publisher that they are working with. You will be edited by an editor or the publishing house. You probably won't have control over your cover, and you most definitely will not have control over the title of your book, which to me is the best part. You'll have limited control of where your book is marketed, but know that traditional publishers will market your book, setting up events and traveling probably all over the country speaking. That's you. Sounds exciting, but it all depends on the popularity of your book and your sales. If it starts to dip, so do the events. The stress is real. The creativity in writing becomes a job. Traditional mainstream publishers are actually investing their money and resources, like marketing and printing, into the promise that your books will sell. No doubt your book will probably appear in stores, bookstores like Barnes and Noble that welcome books published by traditional publishers. They will purchase the rights to your manuscript and pay royalties to you, the author, often offering advances prior to publishing, but they will own your work. Working with a traditional publisher can be lucrative as long as your book is selling, but they may be most difficult to work with, especially for unknown authors who present a greater risk to them. The pressure and the deadlines can be demanding, as it is truly a business that involves many moving parts and people who are making money from what you do. This is the reality of a traditional publisher. It bears repeating that working with a traditional publisher may sap your energy and your creativity with writing when you want or writing what you want. You may be asked to create something they want for the market that they believe will sell. Remember, it's all about the money. But keep in mind, they will never, ever ask you for money to publish your book. That's the big difference. Vanity printers, let's talk about them. Oh, they're very cunning, very cunning. They know many authors will be worn down by rejection. I was guilty. They know the elation authors will feel to finally receive a glowing report about their manuscript, and they prey on it. Remember my story. However, once you've signed your name on that dotted line, the vanity printer or publisher will take your manuscript, take your money, and they will print several poor quality copies of your book, offering you just a few complimentary copies of your own. They will run you through illustrator after illustrator, not keeping with consistency, as I talked about, and you will lack the communication all the way around. Many are inexperienced and are paid less than an experienced illustrator. Vanity printers or publishers won't consult you, and they won't offer any help in marketing whatsoever. They're not interested in selling your copies of your books. They don't need to. They've already made their profit from that hefty contribution fee they charged you, the author. They might not give you the template of your book, the one that you can take to other printers if you desire, the one that you own. And I have a story about that one. That happened to me. You may have to place that condition maybe in your contract if you were ever to end up with them. Vanity publishers have no relationship with bookstores at all, bookshops. In fact, bookshops plain refuse to stock the books they produce. Of course, these companies don't advertise themselves as vanity printers because they know that that is now a bad word. They refer to themselves as self-publishers, which can be very misleading. But there is a vast difference between the way they operate and the way a reputable self-publisher operates. So be leery, beware. True self-publishing is creating your own self-publishing company. Everything is up to you, which can sound perfect and overwhelming. But first things first, identify who you are. Brand yourself with a name that means something to you for the type of stories you write. It could be a nickname or something clever so it sticks out in the minds of your audience. Then simply Google that name many times over to see if it's been used in the publishing world already. Ask yourself if you need an editor, someone who's impartial, to look over your story for errors that we as authors blindly don't see. Very important to have an editor. There are different types of editing. There's line editing, grammatical, content editing. Ask yourself when you read over your story, and as a side note, you need to read your story over and over and over again. Put it to the side, come back to it days later, weeks later, and read it over and over again. And then you're going to ask yourself, could I say this line in a more concise or clever way? Next, find your artist or illustrator to create your logo for the back of your book, which we've got, let's see, on this one, just to show you. It's very small. It's above the barcode right there. So you're going to have them create that logo for the back of your book and name. And that logo and name is going to stay with you for your entire writing career as an author. Begin your self-publishing journey with an illustrator whose work you can visualize, you can actually see as part of your book. Be prepared to pay anywhere from $60 an illustration to thousands per illo. We call them, that's the term, illo. Personally, I've never paid more than $400 per illo. Where do you find these artists for your venture? We find at Whistleslick Press our artists, our illustrators on Instagram or Facebook. We have them all over the world. There are many very, very talented illustrators out there who would love the chance to be part of your project, who haven't been discovered yet, so to speak. So they don't charge as much as the illustrator hired by traditional publishers. But even in this artist town of Galena, we have artists that I consider to be hidden gems. We're working with one now. Here's something you need to consider. I would not recommend at all someone who is close to you because of the honest feedback that has to come with the approval stage of every single illo. Quite often, I've gone back and forth with illustrators, back and forth, reworking the illustrations, and it's without any hard feelings whatsoever. If you have someone close to you, that might be a challenge for your relationship. So take that in consideration. Also, most importantly, illustrating a book requires a few steps ahead of time. It requires more than just creating the artwork on a piece of paper. So many times our clients have come and said, I've got my artist, here's the work. And I think, we needed to talk to that illustrator ahead of time to tell them where they need to go on the paper, where to stop, etc. There is a little bit of it could be a challenge. There's a thing that we call bleed, for example, and alignment, which is crucial when you're laying that illustration out onto the template where your content of your words are going to be. This is where you just might need a professional. There's other terms too, like you need to work with the illustrator as far as the gutter, the margin, the folio, spreads, all kinds of things. And that's where, again, you need that professional. Your illustrator, I can't stress enough, is very, very important to your book. You're working as a team. The artist can make your book look professional or not. They're going to help you sell it, sell your story. They will provide you not only with the interior illos, but cover and back cover as well. So finding someone who knows the process is extremely important. Once you've secured that illustrator, introduce that person to your designer, the one who's going to be placing everything in the template, your text and your illustrations. And they're going to be working closely with that person. They're going to also ask you whether you want a hardcover, you want a soft cover, making it the perfect size for the book, because that's important. You want to know about the orientation of your book. Is it going to be vertical? Is it going to be landscape? Or is it going to be totally square? I will tell you, some of the books that are totally square, like the children's hardcover books, those are usually printed in China. And we don't do that, but our company doesn't do that. Finally, your designer will help you to secure an ISBN and a barcode, and maybe even a copyright if you want that on the back of your book. The printer is also critical for a very quality book. Having them quote you ahead of time for a quantity, say of 100 books, is going to help you to decide the price point of what you might want to sell that book for. If not, you're not going to sell it commercially, then don't worry about pricing if it's for friends or family. The printer will also want to know if you want a matte or a glossy cover for your book, and they'll even want to know about the weight of your paper, usually like 80 pounds. There's different weights inside the book. You're going to receive a proof, and I'm going to show you what a proof looks like. You might have thought this was my book, but it's not. It's actually a proof. You're going to get it all very loose leaf, as you can see. And you want to look that over very carefully to make sure everything is aligned correctly and it's what you want. Just set that there. Okay. Once you have your books in your hand, marketing is next. And some people really are just very scared about that, but it's a natural thing. Walk the streets of your town. Get to know the people in the stores. They may be so thrilled that your local author or the author period, even if you live far away, standing right there, they're going to ask you for a book signing at their store. They're happy to sell copies, and they're either going to buy them at wholesale, so you have to be prepared for a wholesale price. So what your book goes for at the back, if it's say $14, you might be selling it to them for $9, for example. So you have to give them a bit of a wholesale price. But they may ask for it to go on consignment. I will tell you, I wouldn't advise that. Some stores you might have to if they're stores that are a special store that the owner, whatever. But normally I don't think I'd go that route. Another way is to also have your book available on ebook as an ebook. And you can go ahead and print your own book with a publishing company. And then if you want ebook, you can contact a online publisher and they will go ahead and they'll create an ebook for you. And that's a whole nother thing. All you have to do is send them the template. Again, reaching out is very important. Navigating in and out of stores, meeting people. They might ask you to do various venues, such as do you come to schools? Would you speak at this organization that we have, this library, author signings, LItFests? Ta-da! What you do is up to you. There are many book associations too you can belong to, such as Galena. Now you're considered an independent, an indie author at this point. So you can go to the Great Lakes Indie Book Association, which is called Galena, G-L-I-B-A, or you can go to the Midwest Indie Book Association, which is called MIBA, M-I-B-A. Cities like Madison often have LItFests each year for authors, and I think they're accepting people right now. And then there are the awards you can apply for, like the Mom's Choice Award. You do not have to wait around for somebody to come knocking on your door and say, hey, I heard you have a great book and I read it. I want to give you an award. You have to seek them out. You have to work for that. That's sort of a thing that we do as authors, and we don't say much about it because sometimes you have to pay for it. And so I have had you have to pay an entry fee whenever you apply for an award. There's the Eric Hoffer Award. But the Mom's Choice Award is really a good one to have, especially in a children's book. And so what they're going to do is they're going to ask you to pay us a fee, and they're going to read your book. You can send them a template. You don't have to send them an actual book, but you could do that. They're going to read it. And if it meets their criteria, then they will award you, more than likely, that gold sticker that you can put on the outside of your book. And then eventually, as you have your books printed, you ask your designer, could you put that on the book? And so I don't have to keep getting these gold stickers. And that will be on there. I've got some on some of the books. Some of them somewhere. Yeah, right there. Yeah. I'll show you real quick. This used to be a gold sticker. Now it's embedded in the cover, so that you know. So it can be overwhelming to know what comes first. The next step, so to speak, but know this. If you decide to still self-publish your book, there is help out there. You can do this. Researching the steps, or you can seek the help of a proper self-publishing company, one who can offer a whole range of services, from finding illustrators to editing, to book design, to printing and distribution. You, the author, you have the freedom and complete control over every stage of production. How the book will look, how many copies are printed, and how it will be promoted. Working with a great designer and printer can create just as beautiful of a book as a traditional publisher. A reputable self-publisher will make it clear how much each individual service is going to cost you, exactly where the money is going to be spent. One thing is clear up front, is that the costs involved are nothing like the amounts vanity printers charge for their poor products. Nothing. It's interesting to note that self-publishers have been around for years. Virginia Woolf self-published. Mark Twain self-published. It's now considered a perfectly respectable way to get your book into the marketplace. So after my history of vanity printing, I began Whistleslick Press. I was fortunate to have my very talented daughter by my side, who laid the text and the illustrations into a design format. And she and I worked with our illustrator closely and found a fantastic printer helping us every step of the way. Kelly was an architectural designer by trade, and she had an eye for design, measurement, and style. And because of all my previous experiences and knowing what I know now, we decided to create a mother-daughter team, going one step further to take our self-publishing company a little further, rather than just our own books. We decided to help others with the step-by-step process, and it became my mission to help and support new authors navigate through the process and have a wonderful experience to boot. We've had our authors come back time and time again because our process is so streamlined. Everything I previously mentioned, from covers to layouts to illustrators, printers, right down to the ISBN barcodes, a good self-publishing company can do. And we help every step of the way with constant communication, even late at night. That's crucial. It's been an incredible journey at Whistleslick Press, working with happy authors who are over the moon with excitement. There was a quote from Orna Ross. She's a well-known advocate for indie authors. She said, "Self-publishing is not a last resort. It's a revolution." So I want you to sit back and relax and know that there is a more satisfying way to publish your cherished work. Have fun with it. No deadlines, no pressure, just fun decisions of how you want your book to look. You can be creative and write when the spirit moves you. Remember, the more books you write, the easier it becomes with this process. So I want to thank you for coming and listening to my journey. And if those of you on Zoom, you can certainly type in your questions, and we have the staff at the library that are going to read the questions. And if anybody has any questions out here, I'm happy to answer. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And you all have my cards on the tables, whatever you need, or on the chairs. So I'm here for you. Cindy, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Mhm. Oh, no, not the profits, but I would be at the book fair. I went and I spoke in front of the board. They wanted to hear, about the book and the process. But I can't tell you how exciting it was to work with the students in the classroom with that. When it came time because I taught literacy and history, and when we would have our lesson in the afternoon, I'd say, okay, Backwoods Bully. That was the book. This was the book that was theirs. And I'd say, okay, Frankie and Peter, who are the two characters, they've stopped in motion and they're waiting for you to pick up their action. And they really owned that. They loved that. Maybe I, changed things here and there, but it was a great experience for them. Yeah. But no, they never got in on any profits or anything. Yeah. Yeah. One thing I wanted to tell you the story real quick. The first book in the series, this is the second and the third book, and these are all the books I have of that. When I wanted to print these books over with my company, I was able to do the first two books that were vanity printers, Adventures of Peter McDougal, which I don't have, and this was the second one in that sleepy little Minnesota town that was there. I was able to get the template for this when I left, and I redid it with Whistleslick Press, and there's my logo with the little boy on the back. The first book, I went to that first vanity printer, and they wouldn't give me the template, and that was a struggle. Finally, the man at the other end said, "Oh, all right, I'm leaving next week anyway. I might as well give it to you." So I got it and I was able to print it. So because there are so many different illustrators within this series of vanity printing, we have now redone the whole series. It will be out this spring. And there are the four books in the series. First two books are bullying, talking from the perspective of the victim, Peter McDougal. The third one is from the bully. And the fourth one is from a girl who has a disability, and she's the bystander, and she's able to watch what's going on. She's from out of town, but she's moved to the community, and she helps to pull things together. So it's a great series for schools, and proud to show that. And our illustrator for this, found her on Instagram. She's from Belgium. She's the same illustrator that just did for Adults Mind to Give, and she's from Belgium. Canary Song, that illustrator for this, she's from Russia. So you get them from all over the world. Wherever you're looking, you say, I like that style. You really got to own that style like that and want to see it in your books. So, yeah. Are there any questions out there? Yeah. Once they completed their work, I had to stick with it. They had my money and I wasn't going to walk. So once they completed the work, then we were done. With the one with the $40 fee, a warehouse, that sleepy little printer up in Minnesota, that was not as difficult. I just said, send me the template, I'm done. And we were, but yeah, that was an unexpected surprise. Just they throw in things there that if you're not paying attention, you're taken. So yeah, but no, it wasn't difficult. Once I complete the project and the contract, then we're done. So yeah. Any other questions out there? Feel free to go on my website. I think you've got the cards. Our group in here, our audience in here has those cards, and our Zoomers have that information too. If you ever have a question, I'm here and available for you at any time. Just call me on the phone or whatever, and I'm here for you. Matter of fact, I don't know if you want my phone number. Be happy to give it to you, but I am available for you. And it doesn't everything. We also have, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit. We have free workshops. My goal is not to take fellow authors through the mill like I was financially. This is not my goal at all. So we offer free workshops, free consultation, whatever you want. It is free. And when it comes time for the self-publishing aspect of our company, I will let you know that we introduce you to a gamut of illustrators. You pick who you want. That's the first step. That person's going to want to get your manuscript, read it. That illustrator has to read your manuscript so they can visualize what kind of illustrations they're going to be drawing for you. So once they do that, you're going back and forth with them, and you pay them directly whatever their cost is. It doesn't come to us. And then that illustrator, since we know that illustrator, she talks to us or he talks to us, and we start taking those illustrations that we're getting, and Kelly, my daughter, will start to lay them in. And there's a separate fee for her, and it's nowhere near $8,000. Far from it. So just want you to know that. Then the third avenue, when you're working with Kelly, and Kelly is helping you with the illustrator, pulling it in, you've paid the illustrator, you're done. Then you're still working with Kelly for her with the template, and then she will introduce you to several printers. We're very careful about the printers we use. We have had printers um, that yeah, with the canary song, dark book, you could see it might scratch easily. So these were when we picked this up at the printer, it was a very, very hot day, and they were sticking together. And then when we got them home, they were all stuck together, and oh, it was a mess. That's their fault on that end. So we finally have secured a printer that is phenomenal, and the price is right, just right. So we have that printer. We'll introduce you to that printer, and you're done. You could be done within 4 months. We've had people take as long as past a year. So it's all up to you. So you're in control, but you can do this. So thank you very, very much.